Now another character, Milo, who was a very important voice for the right, if you want to call it that, and very important for men in general. Basically an important voice for non-Jews. Him being a Jew himself. He's a half Jew, I believe, but his mother's Jewish, so he's Jewish. He's considered a Jew. Now, PewDiePie did not enjoy Jewish privilege or any other minority privilege. Milo, on the other hand, was giving the advantages of Jewish privilege and minority privilege, being a homosexual. So with those two privileges, Milo could pretty well say anything, and he was protected. And he knew it. And that was his strength, actually, because he was so unlike the conservative stereotype, which the Jews have used in their propaganda so effectively as a false identity of what a conservative is. Here's Milo. He was the complete opposite of that. He was flamboyant, he was homosexual, and he was Jewish. You know, he should be hanging out with Rachel Maddow, being who he is. Another Jew, by the way. And what they do, as I said, they use their own degeneracy to project onto others that they want to character assassinate. Jews bringing every type of degeneracy to the world, even going back to Sigmund Freud, who was a pedophile, sexual deviant. He started a very important, very effective Jewish intellectual movement. It wasn't psychology, it was a Jewish intellectual movement that Freud started and led and instigated. And it all tied into being followed by the Frankfurt School, which were these Jewish intellectuals which were undermining society, and they were kicked out of Germany in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and they just came across the pond and landed at Columbia University, and the rest is history, of course. They have dirtied up academia ever since, and conservative, traditional American society. Everything was corrupted that they touch. Everything they touch is corrupted. Everything has to do with pursuing and promoting Jewish interests. And the intellectual movements which Jews initiated and promulgated around the world was specifically to advance Jewish interests. The Jewish intellectual movements, which are nothing more than Jewish subversion of Western culture, consists of many of the things that Western culture is being obliterated by as we speak. And it's something that has been subverting society for decades. This is something that Hitler wanted to get rid of because he was destroying Germany between the two wars. The natural inclination of Jews to subvert any Goyim entity which they have connection to. Everything they touch, everything they infiltrate, and infiltrate they do, they poison. And you're suffering from this right now. Just look around, every little thing. Look at the news every day. Look at what they do every day. Look at all the new things that Every Jewish activity, day after day, there is always something new which they concoct or manufacture or fake. Something will emerge every single day. It's all part of that subversion and persecution. Things that we are very familiar with, that the Jews brought to us out of the goodness of their heart to create a utopia. Things like feminism, atheism, gender reversal, this new transgender thing they're shoving down our throats. Environmental hysteria such as global warming, preceded by many others prior to this. The promotion of homosexuality, that's been going on for a few decades. The various labor movements, trade unions, everything is to destroy, to break down. Marxism, of course, summed up as Judaism. Marxism is Judaism, as a prominent rabbi actually stated. Of course, out of that comes communism, and then of course Zionism, which is the promotion of the secular state. Basically anarchists of every type to corrupt society with. Globalism, as a result of all that. Natural globalists, because that's all tied in with the Jewish supremacy. And of course, to aid that, they promote multiculturalism and unbridled immigration, all to subvert Gentile culture, Western culture. Break it all down, destroy it, bastardize it. Nothing different than what was going on in 1933 Germany and Europe and everywhere in the world, basically. It's one movement. Degeneracy is their trade. That's what they peddle. Anything from pornography to normalizing pedophilia. And let's not forget materialism, which is contingent on usury, which is the trade of the Jews. Usury. Individual debt and the debt of nations equals destruction. Child prostitution, human trafficking, of which Israel is probably the foremost practitioner of, most prominent place for human trafficking. Sexual deviance of all kind, devil worship, as we have seen recently. Just the worst things that you can ever imagine. I don't even want to think of what it could be. These are things that are kept from the media, are kept from you, from your awareness. So they project this onto a young homosexual. And you have to understand the details about what Milo was trying to say. And most people are just not smart enough, and they're too reactionary. They're too impetuous. They're too brainwashed. And they automatically label anyone like Milo without looking and considering the details. The details being that, again, I keep repeating this, Milo is a proud, open homosexual. And I respect him for that. A lot of homosexuals are in hiding, covert. They're dishonest. They look at what they can gain by not revealing who they really are. Whatever you are, come out and be proud of it. Whatever race you are, be proud of it. Whatever sexual orientation you are, be proud of it. I'm perfectly fine with that. Doesn't affect one bit my opinion of you. Because it's honest. So Milo was honest. And what people don't realize is women are different. Heterosexual males are different. Lesbians are different. And gay men are different. There's no connection in how they approach sexuality, who they have sex with, who they have relationships with, and the response to sexual matters and sexual events that happen to them. The response is very, very different. And I am really fascinated by what Milo said, because he was actually giving us a very important glimpse, invaluable insight into the life of the young homosexual. Now, people are born homosexual. They're not bad people because they are homosexual. They're not sinful because they're homosexual. Nobody chooses to be homosexual. So as a 13-year-old straight boy or a 13-year-old homosexual boy, being molested or befriended by an older man is a very different experience. And this is what Milo was trying to convey. Unfortunately, people's response was not very astute, has been bastardized by political correctness, which is yet another Jewish methodology in order to suppress society and enslave anyone who's not Jewish. Political correctness as a methodology to suppress your thinking has been very successful in that you did not see the nuances in what Milo was conveying to you. And the nuances, as in many other circumstances, are very important in understanding the meaning. And they could not comprehend intellectually what he was saying. I knew it right away. I picked up on it right away. As a young homosexual boy in puberty, just starting puberty, that homosexual boy is a very, very confused individual and very vulnerable individual. Vulnerable in that he doesn't know who he is. All of his life, the expectation was put on him to be attracted to women, be attracted to girls, marry a girl, fall in love with a girl, have children with a girl. And you can imagine the dissonance, the conflict in such a in a homosexual boy, in that he simply doesn't feel any of this. He can't relate to it. Then he feels guilty. He feels that he's sick. There's something wrong with him. And he was simply born with a different orientation. It's beyond his willpower. He didn't choose it. Now, if an older man comes along and introduces a homosexual boy to sexuality, It is very different from an older man basically raping and molesting a heterosexual boy. Now this is what he was trying to convey, and they didn't pick up on it. And it makes me so angry about how stupid people are. And it's so unfair that Milo was destroyed over this just because people were stupid and people were actually prejudiced. I mean, this was a case of gay persecution, because homosexual does not function the same as a heterosexual male. And the experience of a homosexual boy with an older man is very different from a heterosexual boy with an older man. A heterosexual boy with an older man, their lives are usually ruined. It's a huge atrocity that is committed on them psychologically. But what Milo was trying to say is, as a very confused and self-hating, most likely, homosexual boy, the priest that befriended him in a carnal way, and even more importantly, in an emotional sense, gave him the biggest revelation of his life. Showed him that what he was, what he naturally was. Showed him that you are gay. You enjoy me because you are gay. And that really helped Milo. And as he explained, a lot of these young homosexuals get ostracized in their own families. And when the father figure comes along, who also happens to be gay, they pretty well validate each other. The older man validates the boy and says, you're perfectly fine. This is what you are. And the revelation that came to Milo was life-changing, because he said, that's what I am. I'm homosexual, and it's fine. It really is fine, isn't it, Father? Yes, it is. I'm a homosexual myself. I'm very good at my job. I'm very good at what I do. I'm intelligent. You're very good. You're going to be somebody great. You're going to accomplish great things. And you're highly intelligent. You just happen to have a different orientation. So, yes, it cannot be looked at simply. He cannot be looked at as an abuse victim, because he was not an abuse victim. This was not a case of pedophilia. This was a case of revelation for a very confused and conflicted homosexual boy who had no idea what the hell was going on with him and why he was so abnormal. Because he's not a heterosexual boy. He's a homosexual. Now, if 13-year-old girls get taken advantage of by older men, that's a different story altogether, a different situation altogether. Yes, that's rape. That's a terrible crime. It is devastating psychologically. But for Milo, it was not devastating psychologically. He found who he was. So the whole discussion, everything that Milo brought up, aside from his age, which triggered everybody, it has absolutely nothing to do with pedophilia. And these degenerate Jew pedophiles, which are rampant in Hollywood, in politics, the billionaire class around the world, for them to accuse Milo of being exactly what they are is very unfair. It's very dirty. And I feel very sorry for him, because I think he's a good person. And I think that he was trying to teach us something very, very profound about the homosexual experience that others, like myself, we don't have an understanding of. So it was a critical piece of information and extremely sincere and courageous for him to come out and actually say it, that I was not abused. I was made to feel alive and shown who I really was by another homosexual, which happened to be an older male. The older male validated Milo as to who he is. People didn't pick up, and also because people are very, very hypocritical. And this is how they get ahead in society, by showing their hypocrisy. They know that inside. So automatically, it's awful what he said. Oh, it's terrible. I'm not like that. Oh, no. Oh, no. A lot of these people are probably pedophiles. A lot of these people going around looking at 13-year-old girls and saying, boy, what I could do with her. I bet you anything. These same people that are criticizing Milo in such a drastic way are dirty to the core. But it's all pretense. Nothing is real in this world. The Jews always work through deception. So these people have a lot of power. They can bring anybody down. Roosh was called a rapist just because he wrote a satirical article trying to point at making women accountable for their actions and looking at the whole situation from a different angle, which was absolutely hypothetical. They brainwashed the stupid. They provoked the stupid who did not even venture into finding out what was being said by Roosh. And they labeled him as a rapist. The same tactic used on PewDiePie, on Milo, on Roosh, and countless others. The same tactic. The Jews do not change. These are the fundamental methods of Marxism. And Marxism has one purpose: to enslave everyone else who's not part of the ruling class. That's what Marxism is. It's mass theft and mass slavery. Through enslaving and suppressing your mind. Through suppressing of your mind and your independent thought. Through fear and coercion. They said he's trying to legalize rape and all this. It's just unbelievable. And women, as stupid as women are, as naive, as impressionable, insecure that women are, they can be very easily manipulated. And Jews have been manipulating women for a long time now. Also using women as a weapon of the Jews. Women to turn against their own kind, their own race, their own men. That's the power of manipulation, of getting into your mind. That's the business they're in. If they manipulate women, they manipulate half the population. That's not a small feat. That's a huge feat. And all these people going around saying Roosh is a rapist. I mean, this is the most normal, healthy guy. I mean, that's what a healthy guy is. All right. He was involved with teaching guys how to pick up women. He's got sisters. He's got a mother that he's close to. He's got a family that he's close to. This guy has got absolutely nothing to do with rape. But depended on him. Depended on him to the point where he was afraid for his life. Now, Roosh is not as famous, is not as big, and is not as dangerous as these other two, PewDiePie and Milo. So, it's a world that you live in that is very dirty. Very dirty, and it's controlled by one race, one very small number of people. So if you want to be a success in this world, if you want to accomplish anything of consequence beyond being the working poor or the slave, and even if you are distinguished, they allow you to distinguish yourself, you will still be their slave. You will always be working for the Jews. You have to either be one of them or be absolutely owned by them, as are all the entertainers, like all the politicians. See, it's the reason that they're so unhinged about, so offended by Trump, Donald Trump, is that they did not groom him. He's not their puppet. Now, I understand that it's very disturbing that Donald Trump is literally swimming in Jews. But you got to understand something. If you send a message, if you make a comment that Donald Trump is a puppet of the Jews, you're being very facile, superficial. It's much more complicated than that, just calling somebody a puppet. You got to understand the details. You got to understand that where Donald Trump comes from, what his background is. You got to understand about his father. You got to understand that the business that he's in. You got to understand that he's not a politician. You got to understand that he's a business person. And what does a business person do? A business person doesn't pander. A business person makes deals. In order to make deals, you have to appease the other side. You have to offer them something. You have to compromise. And he repeatedly said that he gets along with everybody. And he has to, if he's going to be in business. What do you expect him to do? Round up the Jews? Obviously that can't be done. The Jews run the whole show. Did you not realize that? Ever since, even before Donald, his father, has always worked with the Jews. There's a big distinction between being a puppet of the Jews and working with the Jews. Now, I understand what you're thinking. You're thinking that ultimately he's going to do everything that the Jews want him to do. Maybe so. And it is very disturbing, let me tell you. Extremely disturbing. But you got to understand, always keep in mind the alternatives. What the hell were the alternatives besides Donald Trump? You didn't have anything. The alternative that you had was the ultimate and absolute puppet of the Jewish world order. What you had was a psychopath. And you escaped it. And you narrowly escaped it. Narrowly escaped it. So if you think this is bad, that would have been infinitely worse. In Donald Trump, and you got to understand that the previous lecture I did on him was purely on his personality type, the type A male personality. And referencing that personality type, I am able to give you an accurate prediction of his behavior and of his behavioral pattern. You understand? But in Donald Trump, what you have, based on the type A personality, you have somebody who has what I believe, integrity and principles, and is fundamentally a good person. And he's not working purely for Jewish interests. That's the key. If you had a puppet in there, it would be completely for Jewish interests. Donald Trump has something to prove to himself. Not to anyone else, to himself. It's the most important point, where his motivation comes from. It's his ego. But he's got to prove it to his ego. And we will be the beneficiaries of it. When you make a statement that, don't you realize he's a puppet of the Jews? There's a lot more to it than that. It just shows me that you don't understand that in this world you cannot do anything independent of the Jew. The Jew is the gatekeeper to everything in your world. You have to understand that. That reality. Without the approval or going through the filter of the Jews, the Jew has to allow you in for you to be anybody. You cannot be on top of real estate in New York City and internationally without working with the Jews. In fact, you cannot do anything independent of the authority of the Jew. You cannot do anything of substance or influence without the acceptance and the approval and the authority of the Jews. You didn't figure that one out yet? You expect the president to be different when you have a government run by Jews? Not very perceptive. The Jews have to allow it. The Jews start all the wars, and the wars end when the Jews say that they're going to end. And it's all going to end on their terms. So when you send a message like that, it shows me that you don't understand the magnitude of this Jewish world order. Scenario, framework, milieu, realm equals reality. This Jewish world order, which is unmistakable. And you see evidence of it in every single country which they have infiltrated. The big network, the squid, with the billion tentacles globally, internationally, that the Jews represent and embody. You don't understand that. Without the Jews, you're going to be a nobody. There cannot be Donald Trump without the Jews. There could not have been a Donald Trump. There would not be a Donald Trump. So there's a big distinction between being a puppet and working with the Jews. When you're making a deal, the deal has to be good for both sides, for the deal to go through, for the deal to materialize. You have to compromise. You have to offer incentives. Both sides have to have incentives. So if Donald Trump appeases the Jews, you gotta understand that he has no choice. He ceases to exist. He cannot function. He cannot operate. No one can. No one can on any level higher than the very basic, dismissible existence. Anything higher than that, you must appease the Jews. Because if you don't, you end up like number of people. There's a vast graveyard. Just think, you know all about it. It's called history. Recently, Gaddafi, Hussein, and just this week, Assad. That's what happens to you if you don't at least work with the Jews. Appease the Jews. It's interesting how, since he started really getting into doing the bidding for the Jews in terms of international policy, starting wars, dropping bombs, threatening, destabilizing foreign governments, he's overnight receiving accolades and praise and based on his supposed merit, by leading Jews who were vehemently against Trump as never Trumpers, are now acknowledging him as a true president. And it happened overnight. It happened absolutely overnight. These total frauds that are on radio, on TV, in politics, but mainly the ones in the media who were against Trump from day one. They considered him as a pariah, are now lauding him as a hero, all because he is conceding to the Jews. And he is doing it. Working specifically for Jewish interest, Trump is, at this moment, at this time, we will have to just wait and see what happens and if he continues doing it. And it will be very apparent and very conspicuous if he does continue. And if America First will not be the number one agenda for Trump, based on what he was elected on. But it is, I find that it's very almost comical, almost a farce, how easily detected these frauds are, these Jewish frauds in the media, and how they don't even realize how conspicuous they are in their hypocrisy, and in how one can notice their true agenda, and how one can notice that they are number one Jews first. No matter what happens, no matter where they live in the world, they are Jews first. And when somebody like Krauthammer, who has been elevated to a iconic status artificially because of his Jewish privilege, and I'm not singling him out, because there's hundreds, thousands like him all over the media, in politics, in business, in entertainment, in sports, everywhere you can imagine, because Jews promote themselves and themselves only. Keep that in mind if you ever want to make a mark in the world. That you're not going to have the powerful promotional monster behind you. In fact, you will be kept out. You will be excluded from ever reaching your potential. And for Trump to reach any type of potential, any type of status, any type of efficacy, any type of worth, any type of impact, other than being just a lame duck and paralyzed and made impotent, he has to appease the Jews. You see, living in a Jew world order is very much the same as having a relationship, living within a relationship with a woman. It's almost identical situation. If you don't play the game her way, you will become a non-person. You will cease to exist. It's a constant relinquishment. It's a constant surrender, capitulation to the ruling force, to the force who is in power, unequivocal power. There's no other way around it. There never has been, and there never will be. You have to capitulate to stay in the relationship and to have any amount of worth, at least publicly. Or you will be publicly character assassinated. The Jews will do it, and any woman will do it. As a president, or even when he was a candidate, right? I mean, first thing that has to be done is you have to get down on your knees in front of the Jewish lobby, which is the most powerful lobby there is, and you have to present your case and say, here I am, I'm willing to work with you. That's the first thing that they all have to do. So what do you expect? What do you expect for anybody to do? This is basic. This is fundamental. For any public figure in any industry to do is to be chosen by the Jews. And I'm sure that they made a deal with him. They said, you either work for us or work with us, do what we want, or we will destroy you and your whole family. So what is he supposed to do? He's between a rock and a hard place. Let's just hope that aside from working for Jewish interest, we will benefit from it to some point, and maybe postpone our eventual fate as non-Jews. You see the unmistakable parallels between Jewish political imperatives and female mating imperatives. They're virtually identical in terms of the selection process in terms of who is given the privilege of succeeding in the world, in life, in your life, according to the rules set forth by society, and what legacy you will leave behind. The parallels are unmistakable. So studying Jews is very close to studying women. So the Donald starts wars for the Jews, does everything for Israel. That may be so. But as long as we non-Jews benefit from it to some degree, because if it was any other alternative, we would go straight into slavery, slaves of the Jews. And you got to understand, when you send a message like that, I can tell that you don't understand that United States of America is and has been under occupation of Israel for decades. Maybe as soon as the first Jews started arriving in America. They even financed the Revolutionary War of 1776. It was a Jew that financed it. Jews finance all the wars. Jews finance wars on both sides. And the beneficiary is always the Jews. And the Jews are salivating for a war right now. It's long overdue. Constant war. It's constant business. And Donald Trump is, after all, a businessman. It could be worse. A lot worse. You could actually have a puppet. 100% absolute puppet instead of a businessman. I'd rather take a businessman. I mean, who are you looking for? Something from Fantasyland? That's not going to happen. You have to understand this catastrophic reality of the world that we live in. So all I'm trying to say is the big distinction is between puppet and between working with the Jews. There is no choice but to work with the Jews. The Jews are the gatekeepers everywhere. Chances are you work for a Jew. We are on Jewish territory as I speak, right on this platform. And you see what the Jews have done. They can giveth and they can destroyeth, just like that. Their power is immense. Just keep that in mind. There cannot be any leader who refuses to work with the Jews. All other presidents have been nothing more than puppets of the Jews in modern time. Even going back to the Civil War, even going back to Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, who was a Jew himself. So you have to understand it on a much wider scope, and you have to understand what the reality is, and we have to unfortunately work within reality. Now, Kushner, his son-in-law, doesn't just come out of thin air. Kushner's father was Fred Trump's partner in real estate. So, the Trumps are inseparable from the Jews. Inextricable from the Jews. As is our vast amounts of everyone who you know of. Those who are independent of the Jews, we've never heard of. People like you and me. No one's ever heard of us. Because we're independent of Jews, more or less. Maybe not even us completely. Amazing. If you look at anyone of any substance, influence, or notoriety in the world, the Jews made who they are. However, besides all that, he can still be a nationalist. He can still be a patriot. And he could sincerely still want to make America great as much as he possibly is able to, working in a Jew world. However, the Jews did not create Donald Trump. They created Barack Obama, Justin Trudeau, and countless, hundreds of other politicians all around the world in some of the most important countries in the world, who were literally groomed from birth through their education, through their party affiliation, through their whole history in politics. They were groomed from birth, as Obama was. Obama has nothing to do with American blacks. You know that. Wake up, black people, wake up. It's time for you to get an education as to who your masters actually are. It's not white people. It never was white people. And in some of the most obscure countries in the world, they created all these politicians who work for them. Probably the country that you live in. Your leaders are either Jews or work for them. And they are working towards not your interest, not your future, but for Jewish interest alone. Now, Donald Trump, it's not enough that Donald Trump appeases them, works with them, but I don't think they own Donald Trump, and that's why they can't handle it. They will not accept it. They want to absolutely decimate him, eliminate him one way or another. unless the Jews get what they want from Donald Trump. That's fine. They are in business together. They have to be. Trump has to be. He's making deals. He's making deals with the Jews. Every single day. You just keep an eye on it. He's making deals with the Jews every single day. Over and over and constantly. It happens perpetually, incessantly. Could he be playing the Jews? As much as it can ever be humanly possible to play the Jews. Donald Trump is the one who may be doing it. Donald Trump is playing the Jews. Because everything has to go through them. Remember that. Everything has to go through them. You can lead your little life, your little inconsequential life, your powerless little life. But if you want to go even a step beyond that, it has to go through the Jews and approved by the Jews and in favor of the Jews. So it's not just women that's a problem. There's a much greater problem. Much more universal problem. This world has been hijacked. Thanks for listening.